Good morning, everybody. Hazak Baruch. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful Thursday morning. Welcome, everybody. Today's class has been sponsored anonymously for the refuah shelema of all of Am Yisrael. Hashem should bless all of us, keep us all healthy and safe. B'ezrat Hashem, we should hear Yeshuot for everybody amongst Am Yisrael. Amen. Rabotai, we are studying Perashat Balak. Balak is actually a king. He's the king of Moab. And he is very afraid that the Jewish people are going to wipe him out, like they have wiped out Sichon, Og, Emori, everyone before him. So he hires a sorcerer by the name of Balaam. And Balaam knew tremendous things. He had tremendous power. He knew the exact second that Hashem gets angry. The pasuk says, El zo'em bechol yom. So please pay attention to these words today. They're very important. El zo'em bechol yom. God gets angry every day. Okay? How long is God's anger that every day? Ki rega be'apo. God gets angry for a rega. Okay? You say to somebody in Israel, Ten li rega, habibi, rega, okay? Give me a minute. How long is a rega? The Gemara says, rega is the amount of time that it takes to say rega. 2 syllables. That's how long a rega is, and that's it. God gets angry for rega, done. Every day, for those 2 syllables, God gets angry. Balaam knew exactly when in the day and how to tap into that second. And he would be able to utter a curse and to bring curse upon anyone, death upon anyone, and punishment upon anyone. And there's something very interesting that happens, is that he tries to curse them, but of course God changed the order. He did not get angry at the end, and instead Balaam ended up looking like a fool. Not only didn't he curse them, he ended up blessing the Jewish people. So here we are, and something that we notice in all of these blessings. So if we please open up, okay. If you please open up to the beginning of the blessings that Balaam gives to the Jewish people, and they're beautiful blessings. And if you pay attention in the Perashah this week, many of the blessings we actually use today. So, here we go. Chapter 23. Okay, here we go. Chapter 23, please open up. He builds 7 mizbechot, okay? He's here trying to outdo 7 other mizbechot that were built in history before him. Okay, the Mefarshim go through what these 7 mizbechot are. He brings a par and an ayil, okay? A bull and a ram. He starts uttering curses, but of course the curses don't come out well, and instead he starts blessing. And if you look at the blessings, there is something that we find over and over and over again, and that is that Balaam, when he's blessing the Jewish people, anyone want to take a guess, or maybe you know, how does he refer to the Jewish people? We know as Jews we have many names. Which name does he keep referring to us as or through? Anyone know? If you want to try to write it on the side, give it a couple of seconds. He's referring to a specific name, okay? Okay, if you guessed Yisrael, you're half right. And if you guess Yaakov, you're also half right. Okay, so you're both right. And that's the answer. The answer is Balaam, he keeps on like jumping back and forth between 2 different names that we have. Yaakov and Yisrael. So for example, if you turn to chapter 23, pasuk 7, Lecha arali Yaakov, ulcha zo'ama Yisrael. Okay? He says, Balak hired me to come and curse Yaakov and to come and curse Yisrael. Okay, I don't know why that happens. Every time I switch the screen, it goes back. Okay, sorry. Either way, it's right here, pasuk 7. Okay, Balak comes to hire me, says Balaam, curse me, Jacob, come tell Israel's doom. So again, Yaakov and Israel. And then you fast forward, again, a couple of things. And he says, Mi mana afar Yaakov. Who can count the dust of Jacob? Umispar et rova Israel. And number the dust cloud of Israel. Again, you see Yaakov and you see Israel. And I think this goes back and forth 7 times. Where Balaam, when he's blessing the Jewish people, he keeps going back and forth between these 2 different names of Yaakov and Israel. And this is pointed out by Rabbi Bernstein. Lo hibit, again, verse 21 now. Lo hibit aven beYaakov, no harm is in sight for Jacob. Velo ra'a amal beYisrael, and there is no woe in view for Israel. Okay? And God who took them out of Egypt. Lo nachash beYaakov, there is no augury in Jacob. There is no divining in Israel. Again, Jacob, Israel. 7 times. It's very interesting. Like, it's very poetic what Balaam is doing over here, where he keeps playing this game, where he's first talking about Jacob and then he goes back to Israel. The most famous one, Matovu ohalecha Yaakov, Mishkenotecha Yisrael. Right? We all know this one. The rabbis, the Chazanim, they sing it right when they come into the wedding. Matovu ohalecha Yaakov, Mishkenotecha Yisrael. Right? All of the weddings, they have this beautiful back and forth. What is going on exactly? Right? How goodly are your tents, O Yaakov, your dwelling places, O Israel. Okay? What is behind this double reference? Good question. That's today's question. Okay? That's today's question. We are going to try to figure it out. Be'ezrat Hashem. Okay? So to understand why we keep going back, why Balaam keeps referring to 2 different names, we have to actually understand what's the difference between Yaakov and Israel. Is there a difference, and what is it? I'll give you the first answer. Yes, there is a difference. Okay? What is the difference between Yaakov and Israel? When we refer to Yaakov and when we refer to the Jews as Israel. Very good. Israel is a higher form. Yaakov is a lower form. Okay, so if we go to, again, chapter 23, Pasuk Zayin. Lecha arali Yaakov. Go and curse for me Jacob. Ulcha zo'ama Israel, and go bring anger upon Israel. Well, Balaam tries and he says, I can't, I'm sorry. Ma ekov lo kaboel. Uma ezom lo za'am el. So here again, putting our first question on the side, what's the difference between Israel and Yaakov? We find something else over here. There are 2 types of curses that are referred to over here. The first curse is ekov. And the second is za'am. What's the difference between bringing curse and bringing anger? And the Gemara tells us that actually, like we mentioned before, Balaam had a big koach. Balaam, he knew exactly what time in the day Hashem got angry. Now again, the verse in Tehillim, it says that Hashem gets angry only for erega, ki rega be'apo hayim birtzono. Right? Now, Balaam, this is in Tehillim chapter 30, Pasuk Vav, that Hashem gets angry, rega. It's only for a minute, a second. And Balaam knew exactly when that second was. He knew exactly what time in the day Hashem gets angry. And the Gemara actually says that if Hashem in those times of Balaam got angry, we would have been destroyed. That's how powerful Balaam was. God suspended all the laws, even though usually Hashem does get angry every day. Which, by the way, it's for our benefit that God gets angry. Okay? Maybe not to go into depth to explain how, but just really quickly, God getting angry in a way keeps us in check. And without that anger, there would be no structure, there would be no order, there would be chaos, and we would get completely destroyed. So actually, the greatest gift is that Hashem gets angry every single day for a couple of seconds. And when there is no anger, We lose all of our sense of morals and values. And take a look. Because for these few days God suspended His anger, so we weren't kept in check. And what happens at the end of the Perashah? Right at the end of the Perashah, the Jewish people go out and they do something very immoral with the women of Midian. How does that happen? That happens because God didn't get angry. So now we didn't have that discipline that we needed to keep us from falling to our temptation. Now, the Gemara says that if Hashem would have actually gotten angry, you ready for the language? There wouldn't have remained Besonehem shel Yisrael, which is a euphemism. It's referring to the actual Jews. It doesn't want to say the Jews because we don't want to curse ourselves. But we say our enemy, but we really mean ourselves. If Hashem would have gotten angry for a second, there wouldn't have been anything left of Yisrael. So again, it's interesting to note that the specific name of Yisrael here is used, not Yaakov. So what's going on in all of this? Says Rabbi Bernstein that Yaakov, like we said earlier, is a lower level. Yisrael is a higher level. And this is really Yaakov's personal experience. He was born with the name Yaakov, and then after he graduated, he became Yisrael. He got a title of distinction. He became more honorable with that new title that he was given. Right? Now, Bil'am, he knew that he has to attack and curse two types of Jews. There's a Yaakov type of Jew, and there's a Yisrael type of Jew. And I'm sure we all know today there are both types of Jews around us. Some of us are more of the Yisrael type, Baruch Hashem. We are maybe more connected to the mitzvot, more observant. And there are some people that are less, right? And they're more of the Yaakov. They're more secular. They haven't reached yet the level of Yisrael. So Bil'am over here, he knew that when it came to cursing them, he would need two different curses, because you can't curse Yisrael, the higher level Jew, with the same ease that you can curse the lower level Jew. So as an example, when it came to the regular Jew, it was enough for for Bil'am, he could curse them at any second of the day. You know, when we speak about Bil'am needing to find that second that God gets angry and to tap into it, that's not true for all Jews. Actually, for the majority of the Jews, he was able to curse them easily. Anytime he wants. And they're susceptible to curse. Because they have divine justice on them constantly. They are not at a higher level. They are not holding where they deserve Hashem's protection. But when it comes to Yisrael, they get God's protection. They deserve it. And so Bil'am knew that for them to successfully curse them, he's going to need to find the second that God gets angry. So when Bil'am tries to curse the Jews, there's two types of curses that he needs to execute. There's one curse on the regular Jacob, that's Yaakov, that's Ekov, that's a lower level curse. That's easy, that we could do any second of the day. And then there's the higher level curse, which is for Israel, which is only through God's anger. And that he needed to wait and to tap in to that second that God gets angry. And Bil'am realizes that neither work. Ma ekov lo kaba'el, uma ezom lo za'amel. I can't curse Jacob, and I can't curse, and God won't get angry even on Israel. Now, what he didn't appreciate is that when God says don't curse the Jews, God was referring to all types of Jews, the lower level and the higher level. And the reason for this is, and this is such an important point, the reason for this is because at the end of the day, even if a Jew is not on a higher level, even if you're only a Yaakov type of Jew, even if you're only a Jew that's not connected, but a Jew is always a Jew. And that is the lesson that Bil'am learns the hard way, and we learn when we study this parasha. Because what makes us special is not our deeds, but our identity. The fact that we are Jews alone has tremendous power. And God did not allow Bil'am even to curse the lower echelons of the Jewish people, the people of Yaakov. What's very interesting is that the Zohar says that Bil'am was a descendant and maybe even a Gilgul of Lavan. Lavan's first exposure to the Jews was how? Was through Yaakov. Now remember, Yaakov Avinu came from Yitzchak, who came from Abraham. And Avraham, right? Inclusion in the Jewish people was by no means a given at the time. That means Avraham Avinu had 2 kids, many kids actually. Were they all automatically Jewish? 100% not. Yitzchak had 2 kids. Were they all automatically Jewish? 100% not. So when Lavan encounters Yaakov, he assumes it's probably the same thing for you. And so when Bilam comes to curse Yaakov, the Jewish people, he also says, all right, there are some Jews that are connected to the pedigree of Abraham and Yitzchak, and they get protection from God. There are some Jews that fell off the wayside, like Ishmael, like Esav. And if I can't curse Yisrael, if I can't curse the higher type of Jew, at least I will be successful in cursing Yaakov. At least I'll be successful in destroying the lower type of Jew and to remove them from the seed of Israel. And again, what Balaam doesn't realize is that the Jewish people underwent a tremendous transformation. Because yes, you're right, Abraham had children that fell, and Yitzchak had children that fell. But once it came to Yaakov, there was a new sheriff in town, and there was something that Rabbi Hutner says, something very powerful. Each of the Abot contribute to the consolidating element of the Jewish identity of the Jewish people. So when Avraham is born, what does he teach us about Judaism? Avraham teaches us that one can convert and to become a Jew. That's what Avraham reminds us. That's why any convert, we call them Avraham. Right? Because Avraham is the one that showed us that. He led the way in showing that it's possible to become Jewish. Yitzchak introduced the notion that it's possible to be born a Jew. Avraham wasn't born a Jew. Right? Avraham wasn't born a Jew. He became a Jew. Yitzchak was born a Jew. And how about Yaakov? What does he introduce? He introduces the final idea that once a person is born Jewish, that is something that they can never lose. If you're born a Jew, you will always remain a Jew. And therefore, all of his children remain part of the Jewish people. So it turns out that what Balaam was trying to do is he was trying to go back to how the system used to be. To how the idea was that, Avraham, some people remain Jews and some don't. Yitzchak, some remain Jews and some don't. But he didn't realize that even those that were ranked only Yaakov, they were essentially part of Hashem's people, and they were included in Hashem's protection. Now, this gives us a very powerful idea. The angel, on the way that he tries to curse the Jewish people, the angel appears in front of Bilam how many times? Anyone know? He stops him 3 times. Very good. The first time, and we pointed this out in the previous class. The first time, he's standing in a huge field and he's blocking the road. There's a lot of other places to go. And the donkey does. He goes to the right, he goes to the left, detour. But there's still other ways to go. The second time, it's narrower. Very narrow path. And the donkey's blocking, and the angel's blocking, and the donkey has to squeeze in between Balaam and the wall. The angel and the wall, squeezing Balaam's leg. The third time, the angel is in a very, very narrow path, and there is nowhere for the donkey to turn. What exactly is that teaching us? The Tzedal HaDerech points out that on the first 2 occasions, when the angel stood in its way, the donkey was able to go around it. It could maneuver. It found a different route. Meaning, the descendants of the Avot. Because 3 times, so Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. So the first time is Avraham, the second time is Yitzchak. The descendants of Avraham, the descendants of Yitzchak, they're not necessarily included in Hashem's people. There are other routes to go, like the donkey. The angel's blocking and you go a different path. But when it comes to the third time, which represents Yaakov Avinu, there is nowhere to turn. A child of Yaakov will always remain a child of Yaakov. And the donkey had nowhere to go, and it simply crouched down and there was no way around the angel. And what that reminds us and that teaches us, there's no descendant from Yaakov Avinu who is not ultimately part of Hashem's people. And that is why Bilam keeps going back and forth between the words Yaakov and the word Israel. He is referring and he's expressing how whether you are a Yaakov type of Jew, whether you are a Israel type of Jew, and even the Yaakov, they do not have a very high, a very lofty connection to God, but ultimately they are going to be under that protection, and with time they will earn and they will deserve the credit and the title of Israel. And therefore Bilam says, I can't curse not only Israel because God didn't get angry for these few days, but I can't even curse Yaakov. What a beautiful idea. And you know what? This is, by the way, the mistake that the brothers of Yosef made. Right? What did the brothers think by selling Yosef? They thought that, you know what? Abraham had one child that stayed to the family and the rest didn't. Yitzchak as well had a child that remained true to the heritage, but the rest didn't. And Yaakov also. Probably not all of us will become Jews. Maybe not all of us will continue carrying the torch of monotheism and the values of Judaism. And they were afraid that Yosef's goal was to try to make them the Ishmael, to make them the Esavs. And Yosef's trying to take all of the power, all of the fame for himself. And they viewed Yosef as a rodef. They viewed Yosef as someone who was trying to kill them, as a pursuer. And that's why they tried killing him. Like the halakha says, Haba lehorgecha hashkem lehorgo. If someone's trying to kill you, then you get up and you kill them first. Someone's trying to kill you, the halakha demands that we get up and we protect ourselves. And the brothers said that's exactly what we're doing here. We are here to kill Yosef because he's trying to kill us. And it's not fair that he's trying to kick us out of the family tree. And if that's what you want to do, you want to make us like Ishmael and like Esav, we're going to do it to you first. And their mistake was they made the same mistake as Balaam. They didn't realize that ultimately the idea that you can decide to be a Jew or not is going to end. Once you are a child of Yaakov, a child of Yaakov is always going to be a Yaakov. Whether or not they act, whether or not they follow the halakha, whether or not they follow the values, ultimately they have that identity as a Jew, and they always have that in their genes, the ability to always come back. And I guess you could say, we know that in halakha, you need to make a chazakah, to make something known, to be something that's going to stick. How many times till you make a chazakah? How many times till something becomes set in stone? 3. So when you have Avraham and you have Yitzchak, it's still not a chazakah. But once you have Yaakov, you have the trifecta, and you have now a chazakah that every single child of Yaakov forever and ever and ever is going to have in his blood, in his genes, in his genetic makeover, in his makeup. He's going to have the tendency to always have that connection to God and to the people of Israel. You know, it's very fascinating, by the way. Of all of the name changes in the Torah, we don't ever refer to the person by their original name. So as an example, Avraham was not always Avraham. He was originally Avram. But we changed his name to Avraham. Right? Sarai was changed to Sarah. Now, we're not allowed to call Avraham Avram. We're not allowed to do that. It's always Avraham forever. Sarah forever. Yaakov was changed to Yisrael. But what's fascinating, even though his name was changed to Yisrael, we still call him also Yaakov. By the way, we say in the Amidah, Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Velokei Yaakov. In the Amidah, we refer to him not as Yisrael, the higher level. We refer to him as the original title that he was given, Yaakov. And who was the one that changed Yaakov's name to Yisrael? Anyone know? This is very cool. Anyone know who changed Yaakov's name? Okay, if you said angel, you're right. And if you said Hashem, you're also right. Okay? First, the angel changes his name. Right? And he says your name will no longer be Yaakov, rather your name will be Yisrael. However, if you turn later on, sorry. Go to Bereshit, please. And here we go. Chapter 35, Pasuk 10. First, the Esav's angel. Yes, Esav's angel changes his name to Yaakov. However, God comes later on in chapter 35, Pasuk 10 in Genesis, Bereshit. Vayomer lo Elohim. God says, Shimcha Yaakov. Your name is Jacob. Lo yikare Shimcha od Yaakov, ki im Yisrael yihye shemecha. Your name will not be Jacob, but it will be Yisrael. Vayikra shemo Yisrael. So in a way, even though an angel changes his name, God comes back and says, by the way, your name is Jacob. You'll no longer be called Jacob. You'll have now a new status of Yisrael. And a lot of times we think that when the angel changed his name to Yisrael, we're like, that's nice. We got a blessing from Esav's angel. We feel good about ourselves. It's very heartwarming that we got that name change. We got a compliment. We got a praise. But you have to realize something. When the angel changed his name to Yaakov, to Israel, that was not a compliment. That was the angel trying to do more harm, trying to do more damage. Because what he was basically saying is that you are only Israel. And you could only earn the connection and protection of God if you subscribe to that higher level of a Jew of Israel. But the second you're no longer worthy, the second a Jew doesn't live up to the mitzvot and to the Torah and to the values of Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, you lose any status and you just fall back to the regular Yishmael and Esav categories. And that's what he was trying to do. He was trying to make it that you're only a Jew if you're like Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. And therefore your name is only Israel, only if you live up to that level. But God comes back and says, even if you're not righteous, your name is Yaakov. Shimcha Yaakov. Yes, ideally Israel, and that's the goal. But ultimately every single Jew has that chazakah already. We have it in our blood, we have it in our genes. And so, Bil'am at the end of the parasha, just one more idea of here is beautiful. At the end of the parasha, Bil'am, he brings korbanot to try to curse the Jews. Anyone remember what were the two animals that he brought? We said it. I'll read it to you again if you want. But anyone remember the two animals that he brought? It's very, very important to actually pay attention to these subtle details. Sometimes it's the details that we learn the most from. Vayiven shiva mizbechot vayal par va'ayil b'mizbeach. He brings up a bull and a ram. Anyone notice an animal that's missing? There's an animal missing here. Because always, whenever we bring korbanot, we bring three types of korbanot. Very good. There's a bull, there's a ram, but there's no sheep. There is no keves. Where's the sheep? Why didn't Bil'am bring a sheep? Says Rabbi Bernstein something very, very beautiful. We know that bulls in general, Rashi says in Parashat Pinchas, next week's parasha, in general, all the korbanot that we bring, why do we have a bull, a ram, and a sheep? Because they represent the three avot. Again, Avraham the par, Yaakov the Yitzchak the ayil, and Yaakov the sheep. Why? Why is Avraham a bull? Where do we see the word bull in relation to Avraham? When the three Arabs came to his house, Ve'el ha-bakar ratz Avraham. Avraham ran to the cattle. Okay? So that's the bull. Avraham represents the par. Yitzchak, very easy. Why is he the ram? Because right after the Akedah, Yitzchak, after Avraham put him on the Akedah, and God says, don't do it, he took him down, and instead he brought a ram, Isaac's ram, right? And, right, Elo Shel Yitzchak. And finally, Yaakov represents the sheep. Why does Yaakov represent sheep? We find that one of the main stories in the Torah about Yaakov Avinu, when he's with his father-in-law Lavan, they do this deal to prove how much money belongs to Lavan, how much money belongs to Yaakov. And Yaakov does this whole test with sheep. Whichever sheeps are going to give birth to brown-spotted sheep or striped sheep, right? All these different details. And there's many psukim over there going in detail about Yaakov and the sheep. So Yaakov is the keves. And when Balaam brings a bull, and Balaam brings a ram, and he deliberately excludes the sheep. He leaves it out. And what he is saying is that I only subscribe to the first two. I only subscribe to Avraham and to Yitzchak. The fact that it's possible to become a Jew is fine. And the fact that you can be born a Jew is great. But Yaakov, but the idea of a sheep, but the idea that once a Jew, always a Jew, I don't subscribe to that, because if that's the case, then I cannot curse them. And ultimately, that is something that Balaam realizes. Balaam learns that he cannot curse them. He finally understands that even though some Jews that have not lived up to the level and to the standard of Israel, ultimately, Matovu ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael. How beautiful are your tents, Jacob, mishkenotecha, your places of dwelling, Yisrael. And by the way, if we could just take this one step further, and we'll conclude with this thought over here. This is beautiful. The pasuk says that Balaam, when he tries to curse them and he can't, he says, you know why I can't curse them? Lo hibit aven beYaakov. Right? He perceived no iniquity in Yaakov. Velo ra'a amal beYisrael. There is no corruption in Israel. Now, over here you notice there is a verb. What's the verb? Hibit. Ra'a. To see. What's the difference between hibit and ra'a? Okay? Hibit is not a Japanese scotch. What's hibit? Anyone know? Hibit is to see, and ra'a is to see. But the difference, lir'ot, is something that you can see immediately, without much effort. You look out, you can tell right away. Is it cloudy or not? Easy to tell. In contrast, lehabit is to gaze, to perceive, to need to take a deeper look, to have to stare for a long time. And Balaam says, Lo hibit aven beYaakov. That when it comes to Yaakov, you need to gaze. When it comes to Yisrael, all you need to do is ra'ah, meaning, when it comes to the tzaddikim, Hashem doesn't see any iniquity in them. That means they have little or no wrongdoings. So one quick glance, you could tell right away, wow, that's a tzaddik. Quickly, you could tell, you could notice it. But when it comes to the lower level of Yaakov, one maybe can't see it right away. Maybe one is not able to see their greatness right away. However, Hashem looks closer. Hashem hibit. Hashem takes a deeper look. He ponders not their deeds, but their essence, their inner core, who they are inside. And when he does, he doesn't see any wrongdoing with them as a whole, as a people. And there is no question that there is a higher level to which Yaakov can and should aspire. However, Hashem's message through Bil'am is that there is not a level which is currently beyond them that they need to attain. Rather, it is a level that currently resides within them that they just need to access. That is the message. Yisrael shechata Yisraelu. A Jew that sins is always a Jew. A Yisrael, whether you like it or not, whether we may see in them good or not, whether we may think they are righteous or not, ultimately, they have it in them. They have the potential. And it is our job to try to do whatever we can to bring out that greatness and the beauty level of Yisrael that is deep down within every single Jew. Matovu ohalecha Yaakov. I think this week when we read the Perashah, we will, as we listen to the Chazan and we hear Yaakov, Yisrael. Till now, maybe we thought it was nice and poetic, but I hope that after today we'll appreciate the depth of each one of those to understand what a Yaakov is, what a Yisrael type of Jew is, and how no matter where we are, or no matter where those around us are, to be able to tap into that beautiful spark of Yisrael that every one of us has. We'll stop over here. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye-bye.